Hai Sobat Srikandi, selamat datang di Women Zone. Nah, Women Zone merupakan ruang belajar bagi perempuan untuk mempertahankan dan memperjuangkan hak ekologinya. Nah, kali ini kita bersama salah seorang profesor yang berasal dari Amerika Serikat. Beliau akan berbicara tentang krisis iklim dan gerakan perempuan tentunya. Yuk, ikuti diskusi kita kali ini. Yes.
Kenalkan, saya Mimi Surbakti dari Yayasan Srikandi. Nah, bolehkah Anda memperkenalkan diri Anda?
I'm Megan Jarko. I am Chair and Associate Professor in the Department of Sustainability and Environment at the University of South Dakota.
Menurut Anda, bagaimana pengaruh perubahan iklim pada kondisi kehidupan masyarakat pesisir?
So I am from the United States. I'm from the center of the United States. And so as someone from a country where we have had a disproportionate impact on climate change, I certainly think that countries like the United States really have most of the role in taking a lead in addressing climate change. So I am frustrated sometimes at the United States in our lack of action, but I realize that the impacts of the people who are going to experience climate change are places like this that are on the ocean that will have sea level rise and that are sort of more closely related to the more vulnerable parts of climate change. And so as someone from the United States, I think it's certainly my responsibility to do what I can at home to try and have us help. And here, anything that you can do, since it is such an amazing region, is wonderful. And of course, mangroves are really helpful in terms of protecting your coastline and doing a lot of things to help conserve the environment here. But as someone not from here, I wouldn't say that it's your responsibility. I think as an American, we really have a responsibility we failed to meet.
Bagaimana potensi mangrove bisa memperbaiki pemanasan global?
Okay, and so this would be another one where I think mangroves are important, and coastal ecosystems are really important because you can sequester carbon in your trees. Having mangroves helps protect your shores. But again, as someone from a different part of the world, I'm from the prairie, and so that would be grassland, and we have almost completely eliminated the prairie from where I live. So we have taken all of what used to be grassland and now converted it into crops of corn or maize and soybeans. And so again, I think where I come from, my obligation and where I'm interested at is in my place, we have a lot of potential to store carbon where I'm at too and reduce our loss of carbon. So I would say in places like mine where, we've sort of degraded our soil, we have an obligation to store more carbon in the soil again. We have an obligation to change our farming so that it is supporting the environment and more beneficial to the environment. I think we need to do things where we're not using as many fossil fuels in our actions, including in our agriculture. So, while I think the mangroves are incredibly important, and again, I'm so supportive of everything to help them stay there, I do think as someone not from here, I'm very hesitant to say you should do things because I really think where I'm from, we need to do things. And I'm certainly trying to do my part in helping that effort.
Menurut Anda, bagaimana peran perempuan dalam mengatasi krisis iklim, global warming?
I mean, in general, I think, we're half the population, we should be at least half of the solution. And though, I think women have a history of showing good leadership towards environmental activism, towards equity in our leadership, towards having more justice. And so I think we should hold men responsible and that men should be half of the effort and they should be doing half of the work. But because women have been leaders in this area for a long time, I think we need to empower women to continue to be leaders and so I would say the role should maybe be for women to take the lead because we've been doing a good job, but not to say that men shouldn't then follow suit, and continue to help lead with the climate crisis. And so, yeah, I do certainly think that women play an important role, and I'd like to see more women empowered to continue to do even more. And including, on the ground, doing grassroots efforts in politics, in leadership organizations, in companies. I mean, I think throughout, it would be helpful if we had more women leading the way.
Apa strategi mitigasi untuk menghambat krisis iklim yang terjadi di Indonesia, khususnya Sumatera Utara?
Okay, it's the same thing where I would say, as someone from the United States ought to be doing our fair share and more because we've contributed our fair share and more. So, if the United States, we make up 4% of the global population, I think we might emit a quarter of the emissions. I mean, it's something that we are definitely disproportionately impacting the environment. And so, we need to reduce our emissions. We need to reduce our consumption. And I don't think that we're in a good position as someone from the United States to be saying that other places, need to be changing their behavior when we're not changing ours. So, it's great for everything that people are doing, and I think that's so wonderful. But again, for me, I think the United States, we need to do more. We need to be a leader. We need to reduce our emissions, and we need to focus on our efforts on ourselves. But as I was talking about prairie before and how we've almost completely eliminated it. One thing in Indonesia that I'm just so struck by is how biodiverse it is, how beautiful it is. There's just so much amazingness that is left here. Right from the mangrove forests, from the lowland forests, that there's just so much here that the world really benefits from having. And so I hope places like the United States can help play a role in help conserving it, but not in a way that's expecting Indonesia to sacrifice things. I think, again, those of us who are doing more than our fair share of the damages should help places that still have, amazing biodiversity left and are especially vulnerable. And so anywhere, of course, along the coast, sea level rise is going to make life harder, and I think there'll be more suffering. And so I do hope that places like the United States will help. And I'm grateful for all the leadership that I've seen here so far and what Indonesia is doing. That you all recognize how wonderful it is here, how beautiful, what gifts you have, and are working really hard to keep them that way. And so I'm grateful for that. And I think, others need to do their role.
Kami mendengar begitu masifnya kerusakan mangrove di Provinsi Sumatera Utara khususnya. Bagaimana cara Anda dan lembaga Anda untuk mengkampanyekan perbaikan hutan mangrove untuk menahan laju pemanasan global atau krisis iklim?
So I am a professor at a university, so the main role that I play is education. Or, where I've really dedicated my efforts is I think we need to help educate people so that upcoming generations are able to be better leaders, certainly than my generation and generations before have been. And so some of the efforts, so that has been more of my efforts. And even within that, I think some of our efforts before have made people feel guilty and ashamed, and I don't think that's helpful. So part of my hope is that maybe we can have a different attitude and we can educate the youth on how they can feel empowered and the helpful things that can happen and the ways they can contribute, but without also making our youth feel that it's hopeless or feel guilty or feel like, we're having such problems. And so I do put a lot of effort in the education part, and then have some work in the restoration part. So again, in the United States, we have grassland and it's almost all gone. And so through a few organizations, I work to put prairie back on the landscape. So instead of having crops everywhere, that we would have some spaces that would be back in prairie, which is our corn and soybean are annual crops. They don't sequester much carbon. Prairie would sequester a bunch of carbon in the soil. You wouldn't have to put in as many inputs, so it would be much better for the climate crisis. So I do try to do some work here at home related to climate change through the prairie. And again, with the mangroves, the more that can be done, they are just an amazing, valuable ecosystem, and so restoring them and maintaining them, I think, is critical. Okay, well, I mean, one of it, I have been so grateful for my time here. I haven't been here very long so far, but the generosity of people in helping me understand the ecosystems here, the political context here, the work that's being done, the challenges that's being done, the hospitality of people, their openness. It has just been so wonderful to meet the people here, and then of course to see here. It's just beautifully, or it's stunningly beautiful, and I just feel so grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Demikian wawancara kita dengan Megan dari Amerika Serikat.